Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. This is episode 15, The Happy Departure from Medical School. Think you guys are really going to like this one. All right, well, thanks again for being on Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. I heard your podcast through the Happy Doc podcast, another great podcast out there for you listeners to check out concerning mental health and how to improve the lives of physicians. And I really liked your story, Zach, because it's a story that I've never heard before. Essentially, someone happily leaving medical school. And this is really kind of personal for me because I have a friend that she left medical school and it doesn't look like she's returning. And so initially I just had the feeling like, oh, well, that's so sad, so terrible for her. But then when I think of stories like yours, it's like, well, you know what? It's just like a change in the road. They're just going to do something different, but they can still live like a happy, fulfilling, great life. So thanks again for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I was digging into your stuff last night, and really the thing I knew that was going to make this morning's conversation so awesome was your About Us video on the zachandsophie.com page.
Yeah. Thanks.
So you're a travel blogger right now, I guess. Is that a loose way to describe you?
Yeah, we do a couple things. My wife and I each have an online business we run, and then together we do travel blogging, except we don't really blog that much, and we don't focus too much on travels. But that's probably the best way to describe us. Is we kind of just have we do a lot of stuff on social media and just kind of talking about our experience and the process of kind of trying to do our own thing in the circumstances that aren't ideal, right? And kind of taking some big risks. And so just kind of talking about that story and what we're doing right now. And so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that About Us video, if you guys want to check it out online, it's essentially just Zach and his wife Sophie just dancing around with their dog. It's absolutely hysterical. I clicked on it thinking it was going to be some serious About Us page about our mission and all this stuff, and it's just them dancing. And I was just cracking up, and I was like, I like this Zach guy. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. So
I'm glad
you certainly didn't have the grand plan of doing this all along. You kind of made a big career change in your life, and how long ago did you leave medical school?
So it was a little over a year ago. It was April 14th. Last April. So almost a year and a half now.
Okay, and you finished your first and second year, right?
Yeah,
and took step one.
No, so I had just finished year two, and it was right in the period where I had to take step one, right? Where you're like, you get a couple weeks off to study and take the test. And it was kind of, everything was coming to a head at that point, and it was kind of time to make some decisions,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it really is a bold decision, and it's really admirable because essentially you got through the worst part of medical school. At least everyone describes it to me as like the not fun part of medical school before you get in clinic. Of course, boards suck, but once you get in clinic, everyone seems to enjoy it more.
Right.
So did you always want to be a doctor? What was really your desire to go to medical school?
No, I definitely I didn't, totally know what I wanted to do. As in college, I majored in philosophy. I really enjoyed that. And I was like, man, what am I going to do with a philosophy major? And as I was thinking, I kind of decided I was really interested in some sort of, going to more school, and I wanted to be a lawyer, but just didn't really feel great about that. I really just, felt pushed to the medical sciences. I started taking, science classes, and I really enjoyed them. I loved chemistry. I loved physics. And just kind of kept going in there. And so I really quickly jumped on the med school bandwagon.
Okay.
And kind of did that whole process pretty fast, and got in on my first round of application. And so it worked well.
Did you have anyone in your family that was a physician?
Yeah. So my aunt is an ER doctor, actually.
Okay. So
and she's kind of I talked to her about it actually, for a lot before going in, and I shadowed with her and some of her friends. And she was kind of more on the position of, discouraging me from pursuing it actually
Really?
at the time, which is interesting. Um, but yeah, I still kind of was like, I don't know. I still feel like this is a good route. And even today, I think I don't regret it actually. I think it was a really important, choice that, helped me to grow in some ways that, put me where I am now that I probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone to med school. So I still am grateful for that experience. But yeah, she kind of wasn't, she kind of discouraged it at the beginning, which is interesting.
Yeah, when I was a pre-med, I kind of had similar experiences. Most of the doctors I talked to told me, don't go into medicine, just go be a nurse, a PA, something like that. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go do that. And then I would talk to nurse practitioners and PAs, and they were like, man, I just wish I went to medical school. So it kind of seems like everybody in this healthcare system was somewhat dissatisfied with their
Right.
career. So I really didn't know what to do. I really feel my desire towards medical school is I was just going to shoot for the moon and see if I got there. And if I didn't, I still would have been perfectly happy being a nurse practitioner and PA because I just wanted to help people with mental illness. So I guess what was your desire to go to med school instead of going maybe one of the more trainings that just requires less years of school, like nursing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good question. There's a couple different factors that, influence us or that certainly influenced me. Um, and for one, I was wanting something. I did well in school and I enjoyed schooling. And I think there's this desire to like have that directly influence your life somehow. Like if you're a smart person, you should go into a career that requires you to be smart,
Yeah.
And so like there's like this natural progression where like people that get good grades in school tend to go into like, more schooling and higher education in these careers. And like, med school is one of those really competitive ones. I was like, yeah, I think that would really push me and I'd like to do that, so that was an element. There's also the element of just like, I did really want to do something meaningful with my life. I wanted a career that I felt good about, where I felt like I could help people and, make a difference in people's lives. And, at early on, I think, med school was one that where I was like, this is definitely how I could have a meaningful career. And I don't think I saw early on that, how you can have a meaningful career in lots of other places too, so there's definitely a bias there that I probably fell into. And
Yeah.
then I think, maybe a big element of it, that influenced me and influenced a lot of people is, wanting to kind of, prove yourself, wanting to be able to provide for a family, have some sort of stable career and do something that you're proud of, or realistically is what other people are admiring you for,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we all like that. There's something about when I would go and talk to people and tell them, oh, well, actually, I'm going to medical school, and they go, oh, well, and like
Yeah.
we really like that crap, and I think that's actually a problem that can really, bias a lot of our decisions. But I think that definitely, influenced my decision as well.
Yeah, I never really realized how significant sort of telling people you're in medical school kind of is. Because I notice when I tell people I'm in medical school, I get sort of the same reaction like, oh, whoa, like you must be a real big smarty pants. And I don't feel like that because in many ways I feel like a complete moron in very many other aspects of my life. And so now I almost like saying, I'm just trying to study mental illness kind of thing. Just so, because I want to make other people feel like I'm not better than them. I'm not significantly smarter than them by any means. I just try to say like I'm chasing my dream of trying to understand mental illness is better. And kind of you
Yeah.
touched on it. I think like bettering people's lives is really just you do that by chasing your own dreams, whatever that may be. Because, while you're certainly not a doctor or not a, student doctor at the moment, just watching your YouTube videos last night like helped me feel better because you posted a video in a river in Oregon, and I was like, oh my god, like I live so close to there. Me and my fiance go rent stand-up paddle boards and go cruise around and have a good time just because that looked like such a fantastic experience. Now, prior to medical school, did you have any sort of mental health challenges? Were you dealing with depression at all?
Not really. That was something I never really worried about too much. I never felt like I dealt with a ton. I know there were times, where I'd get really um, bogged down with work and or school, and um, that would, that's hard on your mental game, but nothing that I don't know I would call, full fledged like depression. I think that in med school it was definitely a little different, but not really before.
So how did medical school differ from your expectations? Sort of like expectations versus reality.
Yeah, I think there were a couple things there too, and some of it was just my fault for not doing a lot of research ahead of time. I kind of jumped into this thing just on a gut feeling that like I'm not really sure how this is going to pan out, but I feel like this is the next step,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went, and there were lots of things where that I didn't like. All of a sudden, like, I didn't enjoy the material anymore. It was different than college, where I felt like I could really dig in and understand something, and really learn it well. It was in med school, you're learning so much so fast that you really can only skim, not very deep into subjects, I feel like. And that was hard for me. I didn't like, I definitely preferred depth as opposed to breadth. And I think that I lost a lot of interest. And so it just wasn't, it was hard learning the material, and it's not fun anymore. And then another big factor was just, I noticed a lot of inefficiencies that were hard for me. I noticed things that like everyone was complaining about, that like, we have to, like, the way that the education system was set up, or all these like problems within medicine and medical education, but like nobody was really like working on it, right? It was just like, well, this is just the way it is. Like, let's just, bust this out. Let's get through it. And then we'll get to third year, then we'll get to residency, and then we'll be done and we'll be out of it, But I was like, man, that doesn't really like help the system at all, right? Like, somebody's got to come back and try and fix this thing. And so I was like, that's something that I became really passionate about, because I just hate that kind of stuff. I didn't like when stuff doesn't work right, or when people, whenever, and so I was like, something I'd like to do is take the experience I've had in med school and give myself some more time by leaving med school, and so that I can kind of look at these problems and at least try something to work on this stuff, because I think that that's one of the reasons we have a lot of issues, is that doctors and med students are so busy. We have so many responsibilities that's just really unrealistic to expect somebody to come back and try and be an entrepreneur once they've gotten out of residency and are finally in a succeeding career. It's like, relax, right? Don't go take up another high risk venture,
Well, and at least what you were kind of talking about reminded me of experience I had yesterday. So I had a standardized patient interaction yesterday, which, if you listeners don't know, the school essentially hires an actor, and they act as if they have, an illness, and they're essentially this standard patient, right? And so it seems like they're building us to work in this system that works absolutely terribly. Because we have a 15-minute encounter with the patient, and then we're supposed to be able to fully document our note in 9 minutes. It's essentially impossible. And at the same time, we're supposed to be like empathetic and understanding of the patient, but you're running through all these series of questions. And it's so impossible. And it just seems like the system of the patient interaction with the physician is just so significantly messed up. Okay, I don't hear an echo. I think it's better.
Is that better?
I believe so. So what are some of the efficiencies, like if you could provide one example, what do you think or like the biggest problem you notice with your pre-clinical years?
I mean, I just think that like, well, there's lots of little things and there's bigger ones that are harder, but I think, one that comes to mind, just most people that I talk to hated the first 2 years of medical school, Like for me, that's a problem, right? Like if like 2 years is a long time, to be miserable, if this is your career, like is there a better way of doing this? And why do people love, all of a sudden love it in third year, but they, these other 2 years somehow are the foundation for that, but are miserable, like maybe there's a better way of doing this. And so that was just hard for me when people are like, just get through the first 2 years and you'll be fine. And I was like, well, I don't really want to just get through. I'm like, I feel like 2 years is a long time. I'd rather, if this isn't working, then let's take a look at this and see what if there's anything we can do to make this better. So like that was a big part of it. Or just like even like the EMRs, right? How many doctors hate their EMR at their hospital, but there's not a lot of input from the clinician side into the like technology that we're trying to implement. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's kind of this constant disconnect where the people that are building the systems aren't the people that are using the systems. And so the people that are using them are constantly unhappy, but they don't really have time to go and work on these things. And so I think that's just a consistent theme in a lot of big and small issues in medicine, that we could use some help from the clinician side on working on medical technology, and medical education.
Yeah. And that mantra of just get through this and then it's going to get better seems to be one that I always hear. It's like, get through the first 2 years of med school, get through med school, then get through residency, and then you're going to be a doctor. As if like being a doctor is going to be this happy land on like a fairy tale with a rainbow and everything. It's going to be all perfect. And, you and I both know that's not the reality. And many doctors, quite frankly, hate their jobs. And so I also try to kind of voice that same thing. Like, let's be a little bit more mindful. Let's try to enjoy this moment. And it does suck. I definitely deal with a lot of the frustrations of medical school too, that you voiced as well. But so when in medical school, did you start to feel, you know what, I want out. This is just not for me.
After my first year, I actually really considered leaving. And we had like a 6-week break or something, and I really toiled with that a lot. Just like, should I go back? Should I leave? And I just, kind of broke down all the options. And it's hard, it's definitely a scary decision. And I decided that, let's, want to do this. Let's push through. Let's try it one more year. And still just was like, this isn't fun. And the hardest part was not just, getting through, because I could get through it and I was able to, pass my classes and stuff. But it was like, even when we'd go and, be doing doctor stuff, right? Be in the clinic, and, I'd be talking with doctors that, were in careers that maybe I was interested in. And it was just like, man, this just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound fun at all. I was just like, none of like, it doesn't look good down the road. And, so that's when I was like, man, I don't know if, pushing through might be good if you have a real guarantee of something better on the other side. But I just didn't feel that. It was just like, I'm not super interested in a lot of this other stuff anymore. And so it just didn't make sense,
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And it sounds like, when you were kind of in this few minutes ago when we were talking about kind of the inefficiencies of medicine, and I know you're really into Gary Vee, you have this entrepreneurial spirit, and it seemed like you really wanted to sort of express that. But I guess what I kind of I want to hear about your story is, what was the support system in your life that made leaving medical school kind of okay? Because I certainly want to stay in medical school. I still am enjoying it. But I can imagine if suddenly, I told my parents, like, hey, I'm thinking of leaving. They'd be like, yo, what? Like, so did the people close to you really support the decision that you were making?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. It was, most people thought I was pretty crazy, and most people told me, that I needed to stick around. And my wife is super supportive. She was always there. I had a few family members that were pretty supportive, and really helped me. But most people, by and large, were just like, Zach's having a hard time. Like, let's strengthen him and help him to get through this, and so I think that was, that was kind of hard sometimes, for sure, because you did definitely feel like alone. And it was definitely, there's times when I was just like, man, I'm kind of the, if I believe in this, like, you kind of have to trust in yourself a little bit almost, and just, take a risk, take a leap, right? See if this is going to work out. Yeah. I think that one thing that I do think is like kind of a stigma that we probably should work on is, this whole idea that like quitting is such a bad thing. I thought that was really interesting, because even if, your goal is to stay in medicine, I think that we should all be able to at least toy with the idea of quitting. For me, that's like very empowering to be able, and I've done that a lot of times. And even when I was trying to get into med school, it's like, man, this sucks right now. I don't like this. But then I asked myself, like, you know what? I have the ability to leave at any time that I want. Like, if this sucks so bad, why don't I just leave? And it's like, well, no, I really want this. I don't want to quit. And you stick around, But
Yeah.
something I felt like in med school kind of shifted where, like, talking about quitting is really taboo. There's these huge consequences. Everybody gets really nervous, when
Yeah.
you mention that. And that's kind of like, I think that's like kind of a bad thing. Like, we should, we don't need everyone to quit medical school. We want a lot of people to stay in, hopefully. But I think that, we need to have a little bit better reaction to talking about leaving, because if that's not a living option for you to be able to leave medicine, then maybe you're not really choosing to be there. You're there because you feel stuck, right? So you
Yeah.
want to at least have those options be available, so that that every day when you're showing up to med school or you're showing up to residency, that you're choosing to be there because you like it. And this is what you want to do with your life, not because that this sucks and you have these secret fears in your head that if I leave, I'm going to be screwed and I have no idea what to do with my life. And so I'm just going to like avoid that and, just keep going down tunnel vision,
Well, I think really it's because there's such a financial almost marriage and like cost on the line. I don't know if you went to private medical school, but I'm there now, and it's roughly 75 grand per year. So
Yeah.
thinking about leaving is extremely intimidating. And
You're
I
right.
even imagine the school. I'm at least guessing that the school fought you pretty hard on this, especially because you were a student that was passing the classes, and they wanted to see you be a doctor, but also in their own right, they wanted to make sure that they were graduating 100% of their entrance into medical school. Also, that they weren't missing the last 2 years of tuition that they would have gotten for you if you continued to attend a medical school. So, what was that like dealing with the school when you wanted to leave?
Yeah, it was, so I was at University of Colorado, which isn't private, but it was still expensive. I think I was in state, which was nice, but I was still around 37,000 a year.
Mhm.
So it was still pretty expensive. The school was, the dean that I ended up dealing with mostly was actually pretty supportive. He was really cool. And he made it clear that he was like, my job isn't to try and keep you in medical school. My job is just to try and help you be happy in your career, whatever that means. And we just want to support you in whatever you need to do. And I really appreciate that. I thought that was a really cool way of approaching that made me feel really, really welcomed. And I was able to kind of just chat with him about stuff and, be real, so we could come to a decision that was best for me. So yeah, I was pretty impressed with how they handled it when I had when I was willing to finally go in and talk to them about it. They were pretty cool about it most of the time.
Yeah, that actually surprises me, and I hope anyone at my school, if they are thinking of listening, hopefully has a similar experience. I'm not really sure. So when did you kind of realize that the dream of medicine, wasn't necessarily for you, and you wanted a different career path? And how did you really make that into a reality? Because I think a lot of students who kind of, like we talked about, feel married to the profession, they also don't know what they could do as an alternative. So how did you really develop, like, okay, I'm going to go into this kind of social media marketing industry and really become an expert in that?
Yeah. So during my first year in med school, my wife and I decided to kind of start something. We had we actually there was a teacher that put on like a little class. It wasn't part of the school, but it was, the school didn't let her teach it as part of the school, but she taught it kind of after hours with my wife and I, and a group of friends. It was kind of like a dead poet society. And
Okay.
it was called, like how to be a physician entrepreneur, which was really interesting.
Oh, wow.
And that's what she was. And she kind of went through and taught us some things, and we walked through a lot of things that, just kind of her mindset on medicine. And it was really eye-opening to me and kind of got my brain churning and thinking. And my wife and I talked and were able to, we started a website for cancer survivors. She's a cancer survivor herself. And so we, started working on that, and I really started digging into that. How do we, build this up and get more traction and help people? And we got into social media and learned a lot of things. So I'd been working on that for, it was like, I don't know, about a year, and we had grown that to around, I think it was like 30,000 followers on our Instagram. And I was like, wow, maybe there's something to this. This is kind of cool. We're figuring things out. And I was having a lot of fun. That was, I think, the most important. So my whole second year of med school was just insane. I'd wake up at like 5 a.m. and like try and get all of my med school stuff done as fast as I could. And then I'd come home and like work on our online businesses like nonstop. So I was just like staying up, for like nights at a time and not ever sleeping. And it was pretty insane. But like, that's what kept me alive, because I was just like not at all fulfilled in what I was doing in med school. So I was like, I'd rather be tired than miserable. So I'm going to just stay up and figure this stuff out in my spare time, Yeah. And it was super fun and fulfilling. So I did have like, some time where I did have like at least some skills under my belt.
Yeah.
Before leaving. And then it was just, once we had like a vision for our lives, we were like, okay, this is kind of what I'd like to achieve, where I'd like us to be. And I can see that it doesn't really necessarily need to involve me being a doctor. I think that, I've got a dream here. I think we can like go for this,
Yeah.
And at that point, then it was just like, okay, let's crunch the numbers. Like, how much risk are we taking? And it, ended up being quite a bit. We had, we used the, all said and done when we left is like we were 97,000 in debt, and I left, had, no job or anything. And, just like, well, we'll figure it out. Cause it's like, man, in my head, I was like, if I'm going to invest another $100,000 and spend another, like, 2 to 6 years of my life on this education track, like I could take that $100,000 in 6 years and I could probably figure something out,
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my thing, where I was like, I think I could beat the path that I'm on now. And so that's what we did. We said, all right, let's take off. And, if we're willing to spend that much money and take this much time and work this hard, let's put it into the stuff we're passionate about and see if we can make it work,
Yeah,
and,
well, that's fantastic, man. And I wish my school had some kind of like entrepreneurial in medicine class like that too, because I think so many of my classmates, we just, medical school is so difficult, and studying for step 1 is just so insane that our entire life is purely studying. And so I think you brought up a good point. It's just trying to be multifaceted as much as you can, at least while you're in medical school, in order to live a somewhat happy life. I know that eventually took you away from medical school, but people look at me, they're like, oh, Logan, that's so cool. You have a podcast. I'm starting to sort of write a children's book with my mother. But I look at all my classmates and I'm like, I think you guys should be doing similar things. I think we should all be trying to look at this as an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, how can we disseminate our medical school knowledge to the general public better? Because right now I feel like one of the biggest problems with the medical system is everyone looks at doctors as experts, and that we're, what do they call it? Perching up from, an ivory tower, talking down to people. And so that's what I really want to encourage anyone listening. If you are a pre-med or a medical student, like, try to do something like me and Zach did. And while you're in medical school, to the best you can, at least do something that's sort of unrelated to medical school, and try to continue to develop yourself besides just purely academically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think absolutely. You got to have some sort of creative outlet if that's important to you, that I realized when I was in medical school, that was something that was super important to me. I realized that like the process of getting into medical school was like required a lot of creativity and hard work, around like trying to, I had to like figure out like what I was going to do to like pitch myself right in front of these medical school admissions committees. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I was constantly thinking about that. And then once I was in school, like, all of that stopped. It wasn't like very creative anymore. It was just like, eat the pancakes, follow the road, and, do this every day until you graduate. And so that was really hard for me. And, so that's why I had to get these other things on the side that really like helped, ignite me and light me up. And, not everybody needs as much as I needed, which was, full time doing that kind of stuff. But I think needs some sort of thing that they do that makes them happy, and you shouldn't be afraid to pursue that. I think there's maybe a fear that it will make you a worse doctor if you're not spending all your time committed on that. But I really think having, sort of a cross training in your brain with doing different things can help you be a better doctor,
Yeah, certainly. So because, this is Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon, let me ask you a few sort of mental health more related questions. So when you were going through this process, you talked about meeting with the dean. Did you ever meet with your medical school counselor?
I did. I talked to someone in our med school and just told them like, hey, I feel like pretty depressed, and got hooked up with a counselor or a therapist. I don't really remember what they were, and but I went to them they were right there on campus, and my school actually paid for a certain number of visits for me to go, which ended up being a real hassle in the end, but they did pay for it in the end, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
So they did, and that was helpful.
Okay, well, cool. And so I'm glad at least you were open to seeing, a counselor. But it seems like at least now that you're kind of pursuing your dreams, I'm imagining you don't still seek counseling or therapy.
No, I don't. The biggest thing for me was just like reading books and learning and sort of, introspection. I just realized that I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
It's a great book, and at the end he talks about logotherapy and kind of this like meaning based approach, and that was huge for me. Just realizing that having meaning in my career was something that was really important to me and to my identity, I think. And when I didn't feel that in med school, that's what was really hard for me, I think, because I just didn't feel like this. It was like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
And so when I decided to, finally leave, it was just like that, just, opened everything up for me. And I was just 1,000 times better the week after I left. It was really pretty amazing, actually.
That's fantastic. So, okay, you leave medical school. So let's tell the listeners kind of where you're at today. What does your typical day-to-day life sort of look like?
Yeah. So that's hard. My day is different all the time, but right now my wife and I, so as part of this, we converted an old fifth wheel into our little tiny home. And so we redid the whole inside and we put solar panels on it so we can kind of just be off the grid and we just can park anywhere. So we spend a lot of time just in national forest land and stuff, going around to different places and try and get good cell service so we can work online and do stuff. For the last little bit, we were in California and Oregon. Right now I'm in Colorado, which is really nice. We're just visiting some family out here, but basically it's just, we have to figure out where we're at, where we're going to be staying for the week or whatever. And then it's really easy from there. Once your water tanks are filled and you've got a place to park, I wake up, I open up my laptop, I do some work, respond to emails, whatever. And then we go outside. We try to go swimming every day to keep us clean. And I try to avoid showers as much as possible. It makes me feel good to bathe in a river. And so we try to go find a river or a lake, go hang out with my dog and my wife, and then go back home and do a little more work and hang out.
It kind of sounds like you've really embraced the whole minimalistic movement kind of thing, just trying to live a little bit more simply and smaller.
Yeah, well, that's actually a huge tie to medicine as well. Actually, that was kind of something I realized we had to do with these overwhelming. Well, for a lot of reasons, but it was in medicine you have these huge loans, and then you have these huge paychecks kind of way down the road, and it can you can get really stuck in these golden handcuffs almost, right? Where it's you don't want to leave medicine because you're not sure how you'd be able to make money doing anything else. And so that was a huge thing for me, is we need to reduce our costs down to a bare minimum. How can I get what's the minimum like amount of money I need every month to survive and still be happy. And when we came up with that number, it was like, wow, that's not very much. Like I could do that doing anything. And then like once we had a foundation of good personal finance, it was super easy to take risks because you're just like, man, if I don't make any money in my business, we'll go mow some lawns or something and make it up for the month, or and so minimalism, got super passionate about that because not only did it free me to pursue my passions financially, but it also just felt good, like not being burdened down by having to worry so much about money and having so much like stuff. It just felt really liberating.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, I just posted on Instagram a post from DeMar DeRosa talking about how he's an NBA player. He's passionate about talking about his experiences with depression. And so he posted about how he wishes everyone in the world could be rich because people will look at him and are like, how are you depressed? You can buy anything that you want. And I think doctors sort of have that similar philosophy of, it's okay to be depressed as a pre-med student or a medical student. We're living under loans. As a resident, we're not getting paid very well. But, once we're a doctor, we'll have all this money and it's going to be so amazing. And I think that's just such an unhealthy way to think of things. And so I really like kind of your philosophy of trying to be minimalistic and just focus on what really makes you happy. So I also don't want to paint this picture of you leaving medical school as like perfectly happy either. Like, have you noticed any mental health challenges since leaving medical school, since, being more of an entrepreneur, living off the grid, as you say?
Yeah. So that, my second year in med school was probably the hardest on me, emotionally, I thought at the time, but then the first year out was almost harder because it was definitely super stressful, right? Mm-hmm. Like I said, I walked away with $97,000 in debt and I had no job lined up. My first one I got paid $10 an hour and I was like, freak, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And, we eventually, we pivoted around and, I was able to get a better job later on, but it was hard. It was definitely super stressful trying to figure stuff out. And that was really, it was a hard time. You had to really, push through and just believe. And, but the thing that I always came back to when there were hard times and I was stressed, I wasn't sure what to do, is I'd kind of had options at that point, right? Which is what I talked about earlier that I think is really important, right? Having the option in medical school. When I was out, I realized I have options right now. I can stay trying to do what I'm doing, or I can go back because I'd put myself on a year-long leave of absence just in case I wanted to leave that door open, And so I was like, this is bad right now. Is this bad enough that I want to go back to med school? And it was always no, because in med school, even though I didn't have as many like financial stressors or just like not knowing what you're doing stressors, like because you have loans and you have like a path that's laid out for you. It was definitely harder because I felt like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Just like, I wasn't proud of it. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't something that I was just like, I was excited to tell myself about or tell other people about. And that was depressing to me. That was like, if you have these passions in life that you're suppressing, that was like one of the hardest things for me to.
It's a horrible way to live. Yeah.
And so being stressed out and going through all the crap of figuring out how to survive after leaving med school, way easier than dealing with suppressing your life.
Yeah. Well, certainly, man. And, I'm glad that, you found a happier passion, a happier way to really live your life. And, I'm also glad though you highlighted still the struggles of it and how like, it's not picture perfect. And, there's always grass isn't always greener on the other side necessarily. But so do you ever see yourself taking a job, taking a career path that does contribute back to medicine, maybe not necessarily as a medical student and becoming a doctor, but really in any capacity?
Yeah, certainly. That's sort of my life goal is, we wanted to stick with things that we had, we wanted to pursue immediately. I was looking into, starting a healthcare technology startup a while ago that I, got a little bit down the road on and was starting to work on that, but it was just like the timing wasn't right. Like I had just left. I needed like to figure out how to support myself immediately, instead of like starting a business that like, because with a tech startup, you might not get a payoff for, 3 or 5 years down the road, right? So it wasn't like realistic at the time. So instead, I got a job, and then we were able to create our own businesses kind of from there that supported us. And then that's something I'm kind of, working on now, is we're turning our businesses into something more, building it up more, turning it into something more passive so that it can create income while I can go and work on, working on this technology startup. So that's sort of my goal long term, is certainly definitely to give back to healthcare. That's where I want to be long term, is to help other people. What I felt like where I could help medicine is when I looked and I saw other doctors that were similar to me, that were really unhappy, but they were just unhappy because of like logistics and bureaucracy, but they really wanted to be doctors. They really loved it, but there was all this stuff getting in the way. And I just felt like in some small way, maybe I could, help to get rid of some of that red tape and make doctors' lives better and happier. And so that's always been sort of my goal.
Well, I think you definitely can. You have that knowledge of the medical system already. You finished essentially half of medical school, and you have that entrepreneurial spirit and drive, like you said, kind of finding the inefficiencies in the system. So I definitely think you can do it, man, and I really encourage you. So let's kind of finish off on this. I know a lot of my listeners are either pre-med or medical students. So what advice would you have for a pre-med student who's considering medical school, but they don't know if it's perfect? I know that you're certainly thankful of the path that you lived, but I know a lot of listeners would like to avoid that, significant student loan cost. And, if they're going to avoid medical school, if it's not the right thing for them. So how would you encourage them to make the right decision?
Yeah, good question. I think, I think, what was most helpful for me is you got to spend some time alone with yourself and really, introspect, read some books, ask yourself the hard questions, and, so that what you're really looking for in life. And don't let, be honest with yourself. Don't let, the biases of what other people think or how much money you're going to make or, prestige and this other crap that gets in the way, don't let that get in the way, right? Really look at yourself, what talents and skills you have and how you want to make the world a better place, how you can contribute, and if that, involves being a doctor and your passion is there, then I think go for it, dig in and go for it. But, if it's not, don't be afraid to not do that, don't be afraid to do what you really want to do, because I think that's how we improve the world. I think that's how we're going to improve medicine, is that people need, have to push through fear and pursue their passions that are going to help solve some of these problems, because they're not problems that are going to be solved by people that are just looking for money. They're too complicated. Mm-hmm. It's too much stress. It's just people stay away from it, so you have to have someone that really cares about it, go after it. And there are people out there. And if you're one of those people, then, we need you, and you should you shouldn't be afraid to drop what you're doing and go for it, because you'll figure it out. But like I said, I don't think that's right for everybody. And so, if you do want to be a doctor, then we need you too, being a doctor. So go for
we certainly don't have enough doctors.
Yeah.
So now, sort of related question, I guess it's kind of similar though. Now let's imagine you're talking to someone like me, a second-year medical student who's already deep in medical school debt, and they're not feeling great. Like, how do you distinguish between sort of, like we said, putting your head down, just powering through second year, powering through boards, and, knowing that this is something you really want to do, or doing something and following like what you did and like really abandoning this and making that tough decisions of saying, you know what, I don't want to continue on this career path. I know I'm in a significant amount of debt, but I know this is still the best for me. Like, how do you make that decision? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I'd say, maybe reach out to me. We can talk personally. That's a tough one,
Yeah.
And certainly I welcome that. People
okay, so what is the best way to even reach out for you? Because I know you're very active on social media.
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram. I have a website. If you go to zachholub.com, ZACHOLUB.com, you can shoot me a message on my contact form there. Because I definitely empathize with that situation. If you're there, I'd be more than happy to chat with you. But to answer your question here, I think I should say a couple of things. I think, like I said, first, definitely figure out who you are and what you're really looking for in life, and then you have to, I think, be realistic too. I know there's people that reach out to us sometimes. They're like, oh, we think it's so cool that, you're like traveling and working and we want to do that. It's our dream. And, like sometimes people don't understand that like what we do is actually a lot of work and it's really hard. And like, there's this saying, right, that entrepreneurs are the only people that work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. And, and so it's not it really is a lot of hard. We do a lot of crap, and I work, every Saturday, and I work really long days. But I love it. I love what I'm doing. It's really fun for me. And so be realistic. If this is something that you really enjoy, like it's not just like a shoe-in. But if there's something that you like, then it really doesn't matter how much you're working because you love it, So figure that out. And that's not an easy thing to do. I don't know how everybody figures out what they want out of life. I think that I know that for me it took a while. It took 2 painful years in medical school for me to figure it out, So I don't know if I have the best formula for figuring that out. But however you do it, for me what helped a lot was reading a lot of books that other people were sharing things. I would just explore a lot, and I found that the entrepreneurial community was one that I really resonated with. I loved the things I was hearing, and it was something that fired me up. It was what I thought about on my downtime. I think that's a really good indicator that like whatever you think about, like when you're in the shower, when you're like drifting off to sleep at night or something, like what are the thoughts that come into your mind? For me, this is what it was. This is what I think about all the time. So it's like I should figure out a way to make this a reality. And I think, other people can, do that too. You kind of know what you like to think about,
Yeah.
Look into that.
Well, dude, I think you gave some great advice today. Thanks again for coming on the show. I hope you continue with your own podcast because, you were great to talk with today, and I'm really appreciative. And so if you guys liked what Zach was saying, you can find him it's at Zach and Sophie is at least the page I follow. And you have a couple other pages too?
So yeah, Zach and Sophie is the one with both of us, my wife and I. I have my own Instagram. We actually all do. I do, my wife does, and our dog has one.
Oh,
too,
damn.
So you can reach out on any of those.
Preferably the dog, though, first. Preferably the dog.
Yeah, preferably the dog. He's faster at responding.
That is a wrap on episode 15. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today. Now, if you don't know, I am a cat owner, and I think these crazy cats have caught on to the fact that their cat dad is now a podcaster. Because now that I'm doing all these podcasts, they've figured it out, and while I'm recording, they always seem to make the most amount of noise when I'm trying to podcast. My God, I do not know how to deal with this. These damn cats, what the hell am I going to do when I'm a real dad? Well, be sure to tune in next week. I'm going to have a great episode for you guys. It's going to be a difficult story to listen to, but an inspiring story. This is going to be about a pre-medical student who dealt with sexual assault. Really, she was kind of a killer A student, and then her grades really dropped because of this trauma, and it's a story of her kind of coming back from that. So it's really awesome. Be sure to tune in next week for Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon.